Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. We left the city just after noon. The highway out past Glenmore was open, light traffic. Just clouds pressing low and tight and the occasional 18-wheeler kicking grit at the windshield. Lena dozed with her head tilted toward the window, earbuds in, but I could tell she wasn't asleep. She kept thumbing the side of her phone like she was refreshing a page that wouldn't load. We'd been planning this trip for 2 months. 1 week, just the two of us. No meetings, no service shifts, no alarms going off before dawn. An actual break. The cabin was 5 miles off the highway, near the east curve of Moonwater Lake, tucked between an old state park and a scattering of empty summer homes. It came with its own dock, a fenced yard, and a backup generator in case of weather. No other bookings that month. That was the deal. We didn't talk much until we hit the outskirts of Ashford and saw the line outside the pharmacy. 12 people deep. Some wore masks. Some held baskets full of allergy meds and cough syrup. "Is that for the new flu thing?" Lena asked, pulling out her earbuds. "I don't know. Could be allergies. They said something about airport screenings on the radio this morning. People collapsing at the gates. I think that was a prank video." She didn't say anything after that. Just looked out the window again. At the last shopping plaza before the turnoff, we hit a hypermarket. Parking lot was full, but not frenzied. Lena made a list in her notes app. Charcoal, wine, breakfast stuff, and 2 extra cases of bottled water just in case the well filter wasn't as good as the owner claimed. Inside, there were carts full of canned soup and cold medicine. The checkout lanes were slower than normal, but no one was pushing or yelling. We grabbed everything we needed, including a couple of extra frozen pizzas and a hand crank flashlight. Lena made fun of me for that, but it was cheap and near the impulse bins. By the time we turned down the gravel road to the lake, the sun was breaking through and the air felt cleaner. The lake shimmered to our right, wide and glassy with just a few scattered cabins along the shoreline. Most looked empty. One had a bright blue kayak tied to a leaning dock. Our place was near the bend, surrounded by thick pine and maple. The gravel popped under the tires as we pulled in. The cabin was even better than the listing showed. Wide porch, mossy roof, second-floor loft windows overlooking the lake, solar lights along the path, a shed to the left, a wood rack, and the chain-link fence circling the yard, about 6 feet high. The lockbox worked on the first try. We stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something else. Maybe the old cleaning product the host mentioned in her welcome packet. Lena went straight to the kitchen to check the cookware. I opened the back door, walked out onto the deck, and stood there a while. Just trees, water, wind, nothing else. That night we grilled, burgers and corn. She opened the first bottle of wine before I even lit the coals. We ate outside, wrapped in blankets as the temperature dropped, watching the lake go dark. I brought out my laptop later, tried connecting through the mobile router. Not great speed, but it held a signal. Lena sat across from me on the porch with a hoodie pulled tight over her head, scrolling through her feed. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen my way. It was a video, blurry, probably from a phone. A woman in an airport terminal dropping to the floor. People backed away as security ran in. The caption read, "This isn't the flu." "Clickbait," I said, "or someone having a seizure." But there's more, lots more. People saying they feel this sound in their head before it starts, like a high-pitched ringing. We slept with the windows cracked. In the middle of the night, a pair of loons called out from the lake. The echo carried and bounced through the trees. Next morning was crisp, coffee on the porch. She made pancakes. We didn't talk about the video. I checked my inbox. 3 messages from my boss asking for an update. I sent back a short reply and told him I was on limited bandwidth, which wasn't a lie. Later, we walked the tree line around the property, found some old footprints near the north fence where the soil dipped. Could have been hikers, or a raccoon dragging something. The water looked cleaner than any city beach I'd ever seen. We sat on the dock and watched a single boat drift near the far end of the lake. Didn't see anyone on board, just a red cooler sitting open. Lana kept rubbing the back of her neck like she was trying to remember something. "You hear that?" she asked. "What?" "That whine. It's like it's under the sound of the wind." I didn't hear anything. She shrugged. "Maybe I've been on my phone too much. Too many screens." We went back in before sunset. She lit some candles and played music from her phone. I checked a few forums. A sticky thread at the top of a survival subreddit had been updated. Unconfirmed reports of non-standard symptoms. Anyone else getting that high-frequency sound before collapsing? Most replies were jokes, a few serious. One user from Oregon said his sister went deaf before vomiting blood. Another from Quebec claimed the collapse stage happened before any visible illness. By midnight, the stars came out. I stepped onto the porch to pee and noticed something odd across the lake. A faint blue light flickering in one of the cabins. Then off. Then back on again. I went back inside and locked the door. Day 3 started colder. The wind came in harder from the south. Lena stayed in bed while I made eggs and toast. The router dropped out 3 times in an hour. I had to tether from my phone to finish a spreadsheet. Texted my boss again. Told him things were choppy. He said half the team had called out sick. Lena came down around 10, said she'd had a headache all night. Nothing bad, just a pressure. "You don't have a fever?" "No, just tired." She made tea and sat by the window. I watched her phone screen reflect in the glass. The top post on her feed showed an emergency press conference. No sound, just subtitles. An abundance of caution. Neurological symptoms, not yet classified. We debated going into town for more supplies, but neither of us felt like moving. Instead, we inventoried what we had, enough food for 10 days, if we didn't go crazy. That afternoon, a storm blew in. I ran outside to cover the firewood, while Lena unplugged everything. Wind shook the porch lights. The trees thrashed like they were being shaken from above. Pine needles scattered across the deck and stuck to the wet boards like tiny darts. A loose piece of flashing from the shed roof had already curled back from the edge, clapping in the wind like a cheap tin shutter. The rain hadn't even started yet, but the clouds had dipped so low they looked like a sagging ceiling right above the ridge. I wrapped the woodpile in the canvas tarp the host had left by the generator and dragged a couple of logs inside, even though the fireplace was more decorative than functional. Lena met me at the door with a towel and said something about checking the fuse box. The lights had dimmed twice since the gusts started. The house groaned with every pressure wave, the beams and frame moving with the wind as if it were breathing just a little too hard. Once inside, I stood by the front window for a while, watching the way the trees leaned and twisted along the fence line. The chain link held, but the scrub and tall weeds beyond it whipped like something invisible was plowing through them, left to right in consistent waves. I couldn't tell if it was the wind, or if there really was something else moving through the edge of the woods. Lena busied herself in the kitchen, making soup from a boxed mix we picked up in town. The electricity held steady for another hour, though the light in the upstairs loft kept pulsing slightly, like it was on a dimmer being turned by unseen hands. I checked the breakers in the hall panel just to be sure. Nothing had flipped. Probably just the storm playing tricks with the line. But it didn't stop that faint pulsing glow upstairs from bleeding down the wall and flickering against the stairwell like a heartbeat through fabric. The router blinked amber and stayed there. No connection. My phone was no better. Pages wouldn't load, though the LTE bars still showed up. Lena had better luck with her offline playlists, so we played something low and slow while we sat by the fire pit, letting the sound mask the noise of the wind hammering the windows. The temperature dipped again, and I swore I saw frost edge into the corners of the glass, even though it wasn't cold enough for that yet. She didn't see it, and I didn't say anything. Around 7, the rain hit, sheets of it, hard, slamming down like thrown gravel. It didn't fall straight, but whipped sideways, striking the windows with such force that one of the outer screens on the second floor tore loose and clattered down onto the porch. I opened the front door to pull it in, and water immediately soaked the hardwood. The lake, which had been quiet all day, now swelled up against the dock and lapped over it in pulses. pushing floating debris, twigs, pine cones, maybe even a sandal, onto the lawn near the gate. I closed the door and slid the deadbolt. Lena asked if we should light candles, and I said not yet, just in case the power blinked back and surged. We used the flashlight instead and moved upstairs with a couple of thick quilts, turning the loft into our little fortress. From there, the lake was a moving wall of shadow. No reflection of the moon, no stars. Just that bloated shape of blackness pressing in past the fence. We stayed up later than usual, playing cards and watching the windows. The thunder had a flatness to it, like it wasn't echoing properly, like the hills weren't there to bounce it back. At some point, Lena got up and checked the guest room, said she thought she saw movement near the shed. I followed her down and scanned with the flashlight from the back window. Nothing. Just the tarp over the woodpile sagging under collected water, the trees twitching, and the faint clicking of branches on the roof. She stayed quiet for a while after that. Not afraid, just drawn in, like she was waiting for something to reveal itself. The way she kept her eyes on the treetops made me wonder what she expected to see up there. We went back to the loft after midnight. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it was harder. I watched Lena curl up under the blanket and turn on a battery-powered white noise machine we'd brought for sleeping. It hummed steadily. No disruptions. She was out in minutes. I couldn't sleep. Sometime later, maybe 1, maybe closer to 2, I noticed the loft window flickering. A faint light, not lightning. No thunder. Just a soft, irregular strobe like someone swinging a flashlight in slow arcs. I moved to the window and crouched low, careful not to block the glass. Across the lake, at the far edge near the bend, one of the cabins was lit with a deep green glow, not a bulb I'd ever seen. It pulsed with rhythm, not intensity. A pattern. On for 3 seconds, off for 2, then a longer pause, then 3 quick blinks. It repeated. I tapped my phone to record, but the camera refused to focus. Nothing but blur. I switched to the binoculars we'd packed for birdwatching. The image wasn't much better in the rain, but I saw movement. Not a person, not clearly, but something pacing by the dock on that side. Shoulders hunched, legs stiff. The motion reminded me of someone walking in too tight shoes. Off balance, like each step might go sideways. It never looked up, just kept circling near the green light until it vanished into the trees. I backed away from the window and lay on the floor until sunrise. Day 4. The rain had stopped, but fog now hung low over the water. The sky was pale yellow, filtered through gauze. We ate quietly. Lena asked if I heard any news. I said nothing loaded. She didn't ask again. I rebooted the rotor. No signal. The radio in the kitchen only picked up static and one station playing classical loops. No voice. I thought of driving into town to check for service or see a local paper, but when I suggested it, Lena said she had a bad feeling. A bad feeling how? I asked. Like we'd miss something if we left, or bring something back. We walked the fence line again. The soil was soft with runoff. Tracks near the shed. Barefoot maybe. Could have been animal. The spacing was too irregular. We didn't mention it out loud. Later that morning, I noticed a light tremor in Lena's hand as she poured coffee. Not shaking exactly, just a subtle rhythm, like the beat of a song she couldn't stop playing. She said she was fine, just tired. I didn't push. Around noon, the sun tried to break through the clouds. A few minutes of full light illuminated the lake, and I could finally see the other cabins across the water clearly. Most had closed curtains or no movement. But one, the one with the green light the night before, now had its front door hanging open, just swinging, tapping rhythmically in the breeze. No one visible, no sound. We turned off the music and listened. For an hour, nothing. The power flickered again in the afternoon, then cut completely. I checked the breaker, tried the generator. It sputtered but didn't catch. Lena offered to help, but I told her to rest. She hadn't spoken much all day, just sat on the porch and watched the water, holding a mug she hadn't refilled in 2 hours. That night, we ate cold ravioli from a can and used candles. I found the emergency radio in the shed, but it only picked up one signal, looped in English and Spanish. Emergency bulletin. Remain indoors. Unconfirmed pathogen. Symptoms include disorientation, auditory hallucinations, collapse. Seek secure shelter. Avoid exposed individuals. It repeated with slight distortion, then silence, then the same loop again. Lena didn't react, just asked if we had more candles. At 2 in the morning, I woke to a knock. Not a loud bang, just a dull, deliberate knock. 4 times, then nothing. I froze, didn't sit up, just listened. Another knock, this time from the back door. I moved quietly out of bed, found the flashlight, kept it off, went down the stairs slow, 1 step at a time, avoiding the 3rd one that creaked. The living room was dark, moonlight barely cutting across the floor through the broken blinds. The knock came again, just once. I crept toward the kitchen and looked out the side window. There was someone at the fence. Not at the gate, just standing with both hands resting against the metal, like he'd arrived hours ago and hadn't moved. Head down, shirt soaked, pants shredded below the knees. He swayed slightly, not from cold or fatigue, but as if his body had forgotten how to be still. I crouched for what must have been 10 minutes, barely blinking. His head never lifted. I couldn't see his face. Not clearly, just the shape of it in the moonlight, drooping toward his chest like a wet branch hanging too low. The skin looked dark, not by ethnicity, but discolored, like it had bruised deep below the surface. Whatever color it had once been was gone, replaced with that washed-out shade of spoiled meat left too long in the sun. No sound from him, no attempt to move closer, not even the usual nervous shuffling of someone unsure what to do next. He was planted there, solid, as if something had driven him to that exact spot and switched him off the second he arrived. I waited for him to do something, leave, collapse, breathe. But all he did was stand there, barely upright, body bobbing to some internal rhythm I didn't want to understand. When the sky began to lighten, I quietly backed away and went upstairs. Not to sleep, but to watch. The tree line swallowed the last of the dark, and by the time Lena stirred beside me, the figure was gone. No footprints, no drag marks by the fence, just damp grass and a few snapped reeds by the north post where the ground dipped. I didn't tell her about it. Not yet. By morning, the fog had lifted, and the internet, inexplicably, came back. At first I assumed the router had rebooted itself, or maybe the signal was just bouncing off a nearby tower again. But no, the connection held. Full LTE, pages loaded, video played. A ping of incoming messages froze my hand above the trackpad. Lena was in the kitchen when I called out that it was working again. She rushed over, nearly knocking her coffee onto the counter. It started slow, a few notifications, a message from my boss saying he wouldn't be checking email for a while. His son had collapsed during the night and was in isolation. Then Lena opened her feed, and the screen filled with videos, short clips, grainy ones, some reposted with captions translated into half a dozen languages. A man foaming at the mouth inside a commuter train, eyes locked on the floor, hands twitching as if trying to remember how to move. A nurse in a hospital hallway recording a security cam feed, something crawling along the ground, twitching and writhing, before pulling itself upright and slamming face first into the glass. A college student live streaming from her dorm window, while sirens wailed outside. She said her roommate was bleeding from the ears and tried to bite her before she locked herself in the bathroom. Not 1 or 2 isolated events. Hundreds. From every corner of the country, cities, rural roads, airports, suburbs. The captions were a mix of panicked reports and raw information. Nothing coordinated. Some still called it a flu variant. Others swore it wasn't a virus at all, that it was neurological or even environmental. But none of it sounded like any flu I'd ever heard of. People weren't just coughing. They were collapsing mid-step, then rising again in ways that defied coordination. Some stayed on all fours, some stood, some shook as if convulsing, but their limbs would lock and unlock with sudden bursts of energy, like they were driven by something underneath the skin. Lena stopped scrolling. She sat beside me, holding her knees, jaw tight, lips pale. When I tried to speak, she just shook her head slowly. We let the silence sit between us while the soft hum of the cabin settled over the room like insulation. Eventually, I said what we were both thinking. We shouldn't leave yet. If this is real, it's safer out here. She nodded once and added, but we don't have enough food. That was true. Our cabin was well stocked for a few days, maybe a week with careful rationing, but we hadn't planned on being completely cut off. No water stockpile beyond what we'd brought. No medication except a half-full bottle of ibuprofen and whatever scraps were in our travel kits. I checked the car, full tank, tires good. The storm had downed a few branches along the road, but nothing too big. Lena packed 2 backpacks while I printed out a list. Canned food, bottled water, basic first aid, more batteries, a wind-up radio if we could find one. We'd bring cash, keep our phones off, and avoid any side conversations with strangers. I wanted to bring the hatchet from the shed, but Lena looked at me and said, "Not yet." The drive into town was tense. No music, no talking, just the hum of the tires and the occasional flutter of debris as it crossed the road. A few trees had fallen in from the sides but had already been cleared. Someone must have passed through recently. Ashford looked hollowed out, not destroyed, not abandoned, just quiet. One of those Sundays when a power outage has shut every business and people are sitting at home in the dark. No kids on bikes, no dogs barking, just rows of parked cars and the occasional flapping poster on a telephone pole. The grocery lot was half full, but there were no carts outside. The sliding doors were jammed open, held in place with folding chairs. A handwritten sign was duct taped to the glass. No mask, no entry, limit 2 of each item, cash only. We walked in slow. The overhead lights were off, but the battery-powered lanterns along the shelves cast a flickering yellow glow. People moved in silence, avoiding eye contact, grabbing items mechanically. Most wore some kind of face covering, surgical masks, scarves, even a motorcycle helmet. A man in a security jacket stood near the freezers with a shotgun pointed at the floor. Lena held my hand too tightly as we moved down the aisles. The shelves had been picked over. No rice, no pasta, no toilet paper. But canned food was still there. Beans, carrots, corn, tuna. We took what we could carry. In the medical aisle, a woman stood in front of the cold and flu section, muttering something over and over under her breath. Her hand trembled as she picked up boxes and put them back. When she turned slightly, I saw her ear. Dry blood caked in the folds. We moved away fast. At checkout, a teenager behind a folding table took our cash with rubber gloves. He didn't say a word, just gave us a crumpled receipt and waved us through. Outside, I saw something that stuck with me more than anything else that day. A mother sitting in the front seat of a parked car with her child asleep in the back. She stared straight ahead, unmoving, engine off, eyes vacant. There were wet tissues scattered on the dash. Her phone was on the passenger seat, screen lit up with a paused video. Something I couldn't make out, but the thumbnail showed a man on the ground with his arms contorted behind him. We didn't stop again on the way back. When we returned to the cabin, the fence gate was wide open. We froze at the edge of the driveway. I kept the engine running. The wind had picked up again, tossing leaves and twigs across the yard like flocks of startled birds. "Did we close it?" Lena asked. "I did. I locked it." We waited another 10 seconds, then slowly pulled in. I parked close to the front door, engine still running. The cabin looked undisturbed from a distance. No shattered windows, no signs of entry. I got out first, holding the tire iron. Lena followed with one bag while I kept the other slung over my shoulder. Inside, everything was as we left it, except the upstairs window. It was wide open. The loft curtain billowed like a sail. I ran up while Lena stood by the stairs. I checked every room, closet, even the crawl space. Nothing. No footprints on the floor, no dragged dirt, no broken lock. Just that one open window, pushed all the way up, screen removed, and sitting neatly on the floor beneath it. Whatever had opened it hadn't broken in. It had come through like it already had the right to. I closed it, locked it, and pulled the curtain shut. Lena didn't ask questions. She just unpacked the bags, lined up the cans, and started boiling water from the emergency jug. We didn't talk much that evening, Just made dinner and sat on the floor with the lantern between us. The power hadn't come back. The generator remained stubborn. The only light we had came from our gear and the flickering candles in the storm jars. Neither of us ate much, though we tried. The canned stew tasted fine, but every bite felt like chewing through fog. It wasn't fear exactly, at least not the kind that comes in loud waves, but a creeping sort of weight, like something had settled on our shoulders and refused to lift. We'd brought back 2 backpacks of food and water, extra batteries, and first aid, but even with the supplies lined up neat on the counter, the cabin felt stripped of comfort. The shadows had taken over the corners, and every creak of the wood made Lena glance sideways like she expected something to emerge from the hallway. Around midnight, I double-checked every window and locked every door, then pushed the kitchen table against the back one just in case. The fence was still standing, but without the lock, it might as well have been decoration. I used a piece of old conduit from the shed to bar the gate from the inside with zip ties and some rope. Not perfect, but better than nothing. Lena was already upstairs, sitting on the floor beneath the loft window with her back against the wall and her phone in her lap. She hadn't touched it much over the last 24 hours, not since the worst videos started surfacing. Now she was scrolling slowly, trying to make contact. I joined her and tried the same. The signal was shaky again, blinking in and out, but text managed to send with a delay. I got a hold of my sister after a few tries. She said their neighborhood outside Raleigh had locked down. No official orders, but people were barricading their homes and staying off the streets. She mentioned hearing something about curfews and movement restrictions, but local news was vague. National outlets were either repeating old footage or airing pre-recorded content. When she asked if I was safe, I told her yes, and left it there. There was no point in adding more weight to her shoulders. Lena managed to reach her uncle in Chicago, though the call dropped twice. He sounded winded, said something about people crowding outside his apartment building, trying to get into the garage. When she asked why, he just said, "They think the underground is safer. No windows. But that's a trap, Lena. You hear me? Don't go down. Not under." Then the line cut off. She stared at the screen for a long time after that, then switched off the phone and tucked it under the mattress. Neither of us wanted to say what we were both thinking. Something wasn't just happening, it was spreading, and wherever people gathered, it was getting worse. When the first bird call broke the quiet outside around 5 in the morning, it startled both of us out of half sleep. I rolled to my feet and checked the backyard through the loft window. Mist hung low over the lake. The dock below was still wet, beams slick with dew and stained with something darker near the edge. Could have been water discoloration, but I made a mental note to check later. We had barely spoken in the last 12 hours. That weight hadn't left the room. I knew Lena well enough to recognize when she was drifting somewhere internal, not panicked, but calculating. Every hour she spent without distraction seemed to pull her further into that quiet place, where decisions were already forming before she shared them. She was brave, but it was a quiet, practical bravery, the kind that shows up in the right moment without warning. She stood by the sink after breakfast and said something that surprised me, even though I'd been thinking it too. "We should take the boat out today, just to breathe, even for an hour." At first it sounded reckless, but then I considered it. The cabin had started to feel too small, too airless. The trees were crowding the fence like observers pressing in closer. The light was thinner every day, and the clouds had barely moved. A trip out onto the open water could reset us. Not far, just beyond the bend and back. We packed light, just a dry bag with snacks, water, 2 flashlights, and a short paddle in case the motor failed. The boat was a basic aluminum fishing skiff the host had tied up at the dock, with a small electric outboard and a bench seat warped from sun and time. I checked the battery charge, half full, good enough. Before we left, I made one more attempt to scan local emergency frequencies on the hand crank radio. It crackled for a while, then cut in with a fragmented message from some regional emergency coordination point, something about red zones being enforced in high-density areas, but the voice kept dropping out. I only caught fragments. "Sir, involuntary quarantine. Cannot guarantee. Do not engage with the infected. Water sources possibly." And then silence. Lena brought a hoodie and sunglasses. I grabbed my windbreaker and left the cabin locked, though in truth, I wasn't sure who we were locking it against anymore. The lake was still. Not calm, still. The surface was so glassy it reflected the sky perfectly, except the clouds weren't moving. They just hung there, mirrored above and below, grey on grey. The boat pushed off with barely a ripple. For a while we didn't speak. The quiet wasn't awkward, it was necessary. The world beyond the shoreline had become so loud, through screens, messages, memories, that now the silence felt like shelter. We rounded the bend slowly, passing the collapsed blue kayak we'd noticed earlier that week. It still bobbed against a fallen tree, half submerged, no sign of its owner. Further along, we saw one of the empty cabins that had flickered with that green light. The door was shut now, the front window broken inward. Moss climbed up the side like it had aged a decade in days. Lena stared at it until we passed, then kept her eyes forward. We dropped anchor maybe 300 feet from shore, where the lake bottom dropped off. I turned off the motor. The air was cooler here, unfiltered. No insects, no birds, just the occasional creak of the hull shifting under us. Lena opened a bottle of water, took a sip, then handed it to me without looking. "I think this place is dead," she said. "Not just the town, the air, the lake. Like everything's gone soft. Hollow." I didn't argue. I felt it too. The lake used to feel wide. Now it felt like a bowl. We stayed there for maybe 45 minutes. Neither of us wanted to be the first to suggest going back. But eventually I turned the motor on and pivoted the boat gently toward home. As we passed the center of the lake again, I noticed a distortion in the water, barely visible, just a trail of ripples heading slowly toward shore, like something large moving beneath. It wasn't a fish, it wasn't the wind, it was deliberate, like a hand dragging just beneath the surface. I didn't point it out to Lena. She was already gripping the edge of the boat too tightly. Her knuckles had turned pale. Back on the dock, I tied off the boat and helped her onto the grass. She stood there a minute, looking at the water, not speaking. Then she turned and walked back toward the house. That evening, we used the last of the fresh vegetables to make soup and sat on the floor again, backs against the couch, bowls in hand. The generator still wouldn't start. I'd tried cleaning the leads and checking the choke, but it coughed once and refused to turn over again. The solar lanterns were holding a charge, and we had enough batteries for another week if we were careful. I wanted to ask her if she'd seen the ripples too, but I kept it to myself. Whatever she had or hadn't seen, it didn't matter anymore. We were both pulling inward, mapping escape routes in our heads, deciding silently when the moment would come to run. That night, I woke to a sound like scratching on metal. Not frantic, not loud, just the repeated drag of something along the back fence. I stayed in the loft and listened. It didn't stop for almost 20 minutes. In the morning, I found a torn strip of cloth caught in the chain link. It was damp, frayed, and stained with something too dark to be mud. The fabric had snagged on the twisted upper loop where I jury-rigged the rope barrier across the broken gate. I didn't call Lena out to see it. There wasn't much sunlight yet, just a pale grey leaking through the trees, but the color in the cloth didn't need strong light to tell me what it was. It had bled through the fibers and dried around the edges, dark and coppery, unmistakable. I stood there for a long time with it in my hand, running the stiff strip between my fingers, trying to make sense of what it meant. Whoever had come that close during the night had pressed hard enough against the fence to leave a piece of themselves behind. Not just clothing, not just a scrape, but something that came off during contact. They had leaned in, maybe tried to climb, maybe stood there watching us sleep until the metal tore at them without them reacting. That was what bothered me most, the idea of someone injured and unresponsive, just leaning their weight into steel until it bit back. Inside, Lena was packing candles into empty soup cans to make makeshift lanterns. She didn't look up as I walked in, just said we were down to a dozen batteries and one USB brick with a single charge left. I told her about the cloth. She nodded once, slow, then asked if I thought we'd need to leave soon. "I don't know," I said, "but we should probably talk to the owner, extend the stay." We hadn't heard from him since the initial welcome message the day we arrived. The Airbnb app still loaded with enough signal, but it was barely functional now. Most images broken, messages delayed, or showing error screens. I tried his direct number. It rang longer than I expected. Just when I thought it would cut to voicemail, a man picked up. "Yeah?" His voice was rough, clipped, not unfriendly but distant. "Hi, we're at your cabin off Moonwater Lake. We were hoping to extend our stay by another week. Is that okay?" There was a pause, then the sound of him shifting something in the background. Maybe a chair or a phone being passed between hands. "You're still out there?" he asked. "Yeah, we haven't had power since the storm, and the road out's not been great. We've got supplies, but we'd rather stay put until the worst of this passes." He made a sound like a half laugh, half cough. "Smart. Too many folks rushing out, clogging up the highways. You seen any of them?" "Seen what?" "Never mind," he said quickly. "If you want to stay, it's fine. Just leave the money in the meter box by the shed. Lock it. I'll pick it up if I swing by. If not, it's yours another week." "Thanks," I said. "We really appreciate it." Then the line cracked, fizzled, and died. I looked down at the phone. No signal. I tried calling back once, straight to voicemail. Then nothing. We left the cash sealed in a waterproof pouch inside the metal box, as instructed. After that, the signal came and went all day. 5 minutes of connection here and there, sometimes long enough to receive push notifications from Lena's family group chat. A few of them were safe. Others had gone dark. Her cousin had posted a video from downtown, somewhere in Oregon. Police barricades in flames. People throwing furniture from windows. Others just wandering in the street, eyes wide, faces blank, unaware of the danger around them. There was no sound in the clip, just the sickly glow of fire and bodies standing too still in the chaos. Mid-afternoon, while Lena boiled water over the propane burner on the porch, the siren started. It wasn't a storm siren. It wasn't like the ones we'd grown up hearing in drills. This one was lower, more methodical. 2 long bursts, a pause, then 3 short ones. It played again 5 minutes later, but this time it was followed by a garbled broadcast from a nearby repeater tower. "This is a regional emergency alert. Remain indoors. Do not leave your home or temporary shelter. Travel is restricted unless directed by authorities. For the list of safe zones, consult the Department of Health website or contact local law enforcement." It looped again, then silence. Lena stood beside me, still holding the pot, the water inside barely steaming anymore. Her hands didn't shake, but she didn't blink either. That stillness had returned, the same stillness I'd seen in her during the boat ride, the same one she slipped into whenever her instincts told her things were worse than either of us had admitted out loud. We brought everything inside, closed every curtain, and sat for a while by the front window, peeking through the edge of the blinds. Across the lake, the cabin that once flickered green was completely dark. We hadn't seen anyone there in days. A canoe was floating about 50 feet offshore, with its oars still resting in the clips, untouched, its bow slowly turned in the wind. It was late afternoon when the patrol car showed up. We heard it before we saw it, wheels crunching over the gravel, a long, deliberate engine idle. I looked through the blinds and saw the old white and blue sheriff's office SUV roll to a stop just beyond the gate. The driver's door opened slowly, and a figure in uniform stepped out. He didn't walk toward the house right away, just stood by the open door, scanning the property, the trees, the shed, the dock, one hand on his belt, the other resting on the top of the door frame. After a moment, he lifted a radio and said something into it. Then he started walking up the gravel, calm but cautious, like someone who'd seen too many surprises in the last few days. I met him on the porch, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want him approaching the house without us seeing his hands. "You folks renting this place?" he asked, stopping at the bottom step. He was older, maybe mid-50s, and his uniform was wrinkled but clean. His sidearm was holstered. His eyes were sharp but tired. He looked like someone who'd slept in his car more than once that week. "Yes, sir," I said. "We've been here 5 days. We spoke with the owner this morning." He nodded slowly, glancing past me at the door behind. "Everything all right here?" "Power's out. Internet's off and on. We're okay, but..." We've seen people near the fence. At night. Not locals, I don't think. He tilted his head slightly, the way someone does when they've already heard the same thing 5 times and are trying not to let it show. People moving through this area, on foot, no vehicles. A lot of them don't talk, just walk. Some stop, some don't. He paused. You've had trouble? Nothing direct, I said, but we found a piece of torn clothing on the gate, and some strange behavior, watching us, not reacting. He exhaled through his nose, like a man who'd just heard confirmation of something he'd hoped to dismiss. They're coming out of the state road, maybe from the highway. We don't know how far it's spread, but this area's not untouched. I'd recommend staying put. Don't light the place up at night. Don't make noise. Don't go near anyone that doesn't speak or respond when spoken to. Some folks have been off, lost. I nodded. What about safe zones? We heard the siren. There are a few. He didn't elaborate, but they're not taking people unless they're confirmed unexposed, and that's not easy to prove right now. It's safer if you stay where you are and make it hard to be noticed. Lena stepped out then, quietly, with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sheriff, did you see anyone along the lake road this morning? He turned to her and nodded once. A woman walking barefoot along the shoulder. Wouldn't stop when I pulled up, just kept going. I marked the spot and called it in. She didn't respond to my voice. He adjusted his belt and stepped back. You got a weapon in the house? No, I lied. The hatchet from the shed was behind the door, but I wasn't going to give him any reason to come inside. Get something, he said. Not harsh, just matter of fact. Don't open the door unless you recognize who's out there, and if you get a message saying to evacuate, ignore it. Not unless it's from me or someone wearing my badge. I nodded again. Understood. He didn't linger, just tipped his head and walked back to the SUV. As he pulled away, I noticed the back seats were empty, but stained with something dark on the fabric. Not wet, just dried patterns like something had bled out while strapped in. He didn't look back. The sound of the engine faded into the trees like a boat disappearing into fog. A few seconds later, the air seemed to drop flat again. Nothing moved. No birds, no branches, not even the usual whisper of breeze through the fence line. The world around the cabin returned to that strange, still quiet we'd begun to recognize as not just rural silence, but a symptom of something wider, something deeper. Even the lake, usually restless with soft lapping waves, was dead calm. Lena didn't say anything. She went back inside, walked to the kitchen, and started boiling more water. Setting up our little routine like that brief visit from the sheriff hadn't cracked the world just a little bit more. But it had. It absolutely had. And I stayed on the porch, watching the road where the SUV had gone. He was the last official face we'd seen in days. Maybe the last we ever would. I had a creeping feeling that whatever tenuous grip local law enforcement had on the situation was dissolving. The sheriff didn't come out to check on us. He came out to catalogue us. 2 more names on a list he was trying to finish before the list became irrelevant. Around noon, I managed to catch a stable enough signal for a few minutes to load a cached link I'd saved earlier. The Novosto portal, not the official government feed, but a spin-off page run by former moderators and emergency ops volunteers, had gone live again after being dormant for nearly a week. The interface was glitchy, rough-edged, clearly running on backup servers. But it worked. The home screen had changed completely. Gone were the neat graphs and bullet point recommendations. In their place, a black and red header with bold text. Critical civil alert. Unverified visuals inbound. View at your own discretion. I clicked into the live map. The feed was chaos. First image. A grainy street cam from somewhere in Dallas. A man stumbling into frame, clutching his abdomen. His shirt was soaked, the fabric torn like something had clawed up through his stomach from the inside. He dropped to his knees. 3 others ran toward him. At first it looked like they were trying to help. Then one of them leapt forward, mouth open, teeth bared, hands clawing at the man's neck with no attempt to restrain. Just pure, violent attack. The others followed. The scene cut out just as the first victim fell backward under their weight. Next image. An alley in Buenos Aires. A woman screaming into the lens of her phone, voice muted, but her face was twisted with panic. Behind her, a man in a police uniform was pinned against a wall by someone biting into his forearm. Blood sprayed like paint from an aerosol can. Third image, a still frame, watermarked by what appeared to be an amateur drone operator. A small town intersection, 6 bodies piled in the street, none of them in uniform. The drone hovered low enough to catch motion. One of the bodies twitched, then sat up, mouth hanging loose, as if the jaw had dislocated. A shadow crossed the lens just before the feed broke. I scrolled through more. None of the footage looked doctored. Not that level of detail, not that randomness. These weren't viral videos chasing views. They were pieces of something larger, uncensored, leaked, or uploaded by people who hadn't stuck around long after. Lena returned from the shed with a plastic tub of rags and asked if I needed anything. I shook my head and showed her the portal. She crouched next to me and watched in silence. Her face hardened, not with shock, but with recognition. "What's happening in the cities is ahead of what's happening here," she said after a while. "We're behind the curve, but not by much." I closed the laptop. The battery had dipped below 20%, and the solar charger wasn't getting enough daylight under the clouds. We had to ration not just food, but information. Too much at once would crush us. By late afternoon, the feed had spawned mirror versions. The portal's sidebar filled with emergency survival guides, shared mostly by anonymous posters. Some were practical: how to sterilize water without heat, how to insulate windows with only duct tape and cardboard, how to build makeshift alarms using soda cans and twine. Others were grimly desperate: lists of substitutes for antibiotics, diagrams showing where to find the cleanest water in abandoned homes, tips for dressing open wounds with alcohol wipes and strips of plastic. A long post under the heading, "When to Stop Treating and Just Barricade," sat near the top. I didn't open it. The wind picked up again near dusk. Lena stood by the dock, arms crossed, hoodie up. I watched her from the porch. She hadn't said much in hours, but I knew she was still processing everything she'd seen. The boat bobbed lazily behind her, tied in 2 places. The motor tilted upward to keep the prop out of the water. "I think the water's changing," she said without turning around. "It smells wrong." I walked down to join her. She wasn't wrong. There was a faint tang in the air now. Not rot exactly, not algae either, but something in between. A metallic note, sour and thin, like blood in an old pipe. We stayed out until the clouds started shifting, splitting slowly in the sky like tired fabric. Somewhere behind them, the sun was dying orange, but it didn't feel warm. The wind carried a sharpness now, not cold, but alert. Even the trees seemed to lean inward slightly, their branches tightening like knuckles. That night, while Lena cleaned the pans and arranged the remaining canned food into groups, vegetables, proteins, soups, I cranked the emergency radio one more time. The broadcast had changed again. No more looped announcements, just static. Then a new voice, calmer than the last, female, deliberate. "This is a public health update for Region 17, Sector 4. Active transmission confirmed in multiple urban centers. Symptoms include auditory distortion, sensory interruption, motor seizure, and aggression. If you encounter individuals exhibiting advanced symptoms, maintain a minimum 20-foot distance. Do not attempt to restrain. Do not approach. Remain inside. Authorities will issue relocation orders as capacity allows." Then it repeated, then silence. Lena sat down across from me, drying her hands on a towel. "We're not leaving," she said plainly. "We'd never make it through the towns. Not now." "I wasn't planning to," I replied. She nodded, and that was that. At some point after midnight, I woke to a soft thump against the side of the cabin. Not hard, not enough to shake the frame, but deliberate. Not a branch, not a squirrel, just a sound. Lena was awake too. She sat upright, listening. Neither of us moved for a minute. Then another thump, lower this time, against the back near the kitchen. I grabbed the flashlight and walked quietly to the corner window, keeping the beam off. When I peered out, I saw the silhouette of someone walking along the inside of the fence, head tilted sharply to the left, one arm dragging behind like it had lost its bones. He didn't look up. just circled the yard, feet crunching dead leaves, one step at a time, like he was on a loop. I stood there for several minutes, breathing shallow through my nose, barely moving, watching him complete the full, slow circle around the house. At times, I lost him behind the shed or past the tree line, but he returned again, always at the same pace, with the same tilt to his head, the same limp. Eventually, the movement disappeared back into the woods. No break in the underbrush, no sound of retreat, no sudden sprint, just vanished, as if the circuit had ended and the puppet had been wound back onto its string. The storm started just after 3. It wasn't one of those slow-building spring rains. It didn't begin with drizzle or warning taps on the roof. One moment the wind was whispering through the trees, and the next the entire forest bent sideways under a sudden howl. Rain slammed against the roof like fists. Thunder cracked so loud the loft windows buzzed in their frames. Somewhere behind the house, a loose piece of siding snapped and flapped until it broke free. We'd already set up our sleeping area in the small laundry room near the center of the house. Fewer windows, no shelves, nothing sharp. The walls were interior and the ceiling low, reinforced with old wooden beams. It felt like hiding in a utility closet during a bombing raid, but that's what we needed. Lena gathered our sleeping bags and laid them on the floor, lining the edges with spare pillows and rolled-up towels. I placed the crank radio beside the door and kept the hatchet from the shed within reach. The room stank faintly of detergent and mildew, but it was dry, and the walls didn't rattle as much as the loft. We sat in the darkness, listening to the wind scream across the roof and through the trees, listening to the rain flatten the yard and drown out everything beyond. It went on for hours. The thunder came not in bursts, but long rolling waves that never quite stopped. It felt like the whole sky was flexing, low and mean, ready to snap. Somewhere around 5, we heard a sound that didn't belong. A heavy tearing crack followed by a deep impact, like a hammer falling from the clouds. Not thunder, not lightning. Wood, splintering, falling. A tree. Neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, and I nodded once. We didn't sleep that night. Even when the storm started to pass and the thunder moved east, the wind remained, and the rain held steady. I kept hearing faint taps on the siding, scratches on the outer walls, sometimes too slow and too deliberate to blame on tree limbs. When the sun finally dragged itself over the ridge in the morning, the house felt like the inside of a buried shelter, quiet, damp, forgotten. We stepped carefully through the living room, pulling curtains back an inch at a time to check the yard. The back looked worse than expected. A large pine from the outer edge of the property had cracked near its base and fallen directly onto the north corner of the fence. The top half of the tree lay draped across the chain link like a broken bridge, branches tangled in the mesh, trunk split but still mostly intact. And beneath it, half under the twisted fence, half under the tree, lay a man. At first, I thought he was dead. He looked crushed. One leg was bent the wrong direction. His torso had flattened against the wet ground, and his clothes were soaked through with mud and pine needles. His face was turned away, one arm stretched outward beneath the lowest limb. But then he moved. It wasn't much, just a twitch of the hand, a slow flex of the fingers, curling and releasing like he was testing them. His head shifted slightly, not enough to roll over, not enough to raise himself, just enough to let us know he was alive. Lena grabbed my arm. We approached carefully. I carried the flashlight still off, and the hatchet stayed at my side. Lena stayed a step behind. The grass was slick underfoot, flattened from the rain, and the air stank of sap and something beneath it. Rancid, coppery, familiar. As we got closer, I began to see what we were really looking at. His clothes were torn beyond repair, shredded across the back like he'd been dragged through glass. One of his shoes was missing, the other barely clinging to his foot. His skin, what remained visible, was pale and bloated, not from rain, but from something deeper. A swelling under the surface like whatever was inside him had long outgrown its casing. Then he turned his head. His eyes were open, barely, clouded, sunken. Blood had crusted from his nose and mouth, and what little remained on his lips was black. But what stopped me was the sound. He wasn't breathing. He was growling, low, guttural, continuous, like a noise loop trapped deep in the throat, vibrating against a wall of dried blood and shattered teeth. His jaw shifted, but it didn't form words. His tongue lay limp in the back of his mouth. He wasn't trying to speak. He wasn't even aware we were there. His eyes didn't track us. They stared into the ground. He twitched again, fingers digging at the soil like he was searching for something underneath. I knelt down and looked closer. The tree hadn't just pinned him, it had cut him in half. The weight had crushed his lower spine and pelvis, tearing clean through meat and muscle. What remained of his body was twisted and useless, and yet, he moved. He dragged. He twitched. He growled. I rose slowly. "We need to call the sheriff," Lena whispered. I pulled out my phone. No signal. I tried again. Nothing. Not even the emergency call option. Just a dead bar and a spinning icon. We backed away together. Back inside, Lena sat on the floor and buried her face in her hands. I watched the edge of the woods from the window, waiting for the next thing to go wrong. By afternoon, the rain returned. Softer this time, but steady. The kind of rain that soaks everything through without making a sound. The clouds thickened again. The daylight never fully arrived. I checked the tree and the body 4 more times. He didn't move any farther, didn't crawl, just kept twitching beneath the trunk, one arm frozen in the dirt, head still turned to the side. The growling had faded, replaced by silence. I couldn't tell if he was finally dead, but I wasn't going to get close enough to find out. There was no question in my mind anymore. Whatever this was, whatever had taken that man, it wasn't like anything I'd ever read about or seen in a hospital or a video. It wasn't fever or rabies, or some neurological seizure spiraling out of control. That man should have been dead. No oxygen, no circulation, crushed mid-spine and bleeding out. But something kept him going. Not alive, not conscious, just moving. By the time I stepped back onto the porch, I realized I hadn't taken a full breath in minutes. My hands were shaking, not from panic, not anymore, but from sheer effort, trying to stay measured, careful, trying not to go too fast, or too loud, or show too much of my back to anything beyond the gate. That kind of tension wears you down fast. It makes every step feel like walking on glass. Lena met me inside with the curtains already drawn, and the chairs from the porch pulled across the main doors. She'd laid down a crude barricade using the firewood box and 2 empty totes filled with books. It wouldn't stop anyone determined, but it might give us a few seconds of warning. We didn't speak much after that, just nodded to each other occasionally, passed tools and bottles silently. I helped reinforce the window in the loft, covering the lower half with 2 plywood panels from the shed and sealing the edges with duct tape and towels. The nails weren't long enough for comfort, but I angled them deep and prayed the frame would hold. It wasn't a permanent fix. Nothing about this cabin was built for siege, but it was the best we had. At noon, the wind shifted again, turning inland and whipping the tops of the trees into a steady lean. Branches snapped and fell sporadically, and a cluster of crows began circling above the tree line across the lake, dipping and rising as if following something that moved just below the canopy. I watched them for nearly half an hour. They never settled. The man beneath the tree didn't make another sound. By mid-afternoon, the signal returned, for less than 10 minutes. Just enough time to load a cached emergency services bulletin. The header wasn't local anymore. It had shifted. Federal tone, stripped-down formatting, black text, white background, no logos, just numbers and blocky timestamps, like the digital leftovers of a failing system still trying to pretend it was functioning. The message was short. Emergency broadcast, read carefully, active transmission confirmed in all major population centers. Survivors should remain in low-traffic, non-metropolitan areas. Avoid contact with all non-communicative individuals. Affected persons may continue basic motor functions beyond neurological failure. Do not approach. You may not receive further instructions. There was a number at the bottom, likely for a regional crisis line, but calling it only led to a pulsing beep and then dead air. I sat back and let the screen dim on its own. I didn't shut it, just let the battery die slowly in my lap. By evening, the rain had returned again, heavier than before. It pounded the windows like something trying to get in. I heard it echo across the tin siding of the shed like drums. Every once in a while, the wind would shift just right and whistle through the holes in the eaves, making a sound like distant screaming, but not quite. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind, but that kind of lie gets thinner each time you tell it. Lena made a new plan while I was sealing the utility room. She showed it to me on a scrap of cardboard, a list of the remaining food, water rations, how many batteries we had left, how many hours of light per day we could safely use without burning through power. Then at the bottom, rules for contact. No opening doors after sunset, no answering voices unless confirmed, no second chances. If it doesn't respond like a person, treat it like it's not. She didn't say it, but the third rule was written for me. After dinner, we sat in the laundry room again, listening to the storm. I tried to sleep upright against the dryer, arms crossed, hatchet tucked under my elbow. The sound of water moving through the gutters turned into static after a while, and the thumping of loose branches on the roof felt like footsteps. I kept blinking awake, thinking I'd heard someone moving across the floor above us, even though no one had gone up there in hours. Sometime after midnight, Lena woke me with a whisper. She'd heard something outside, soft dragging against the back siding. Not the tree, not the storm. Something lighter, deliberate, like a hand or a wet coat sleeve scraping along the wood in long strokes. I crawled across the tile, turned off the solar lantern, and pushed my ear to the base of the wall. Silence, then a soft tap, then two more. I waited, counted. Nothing after that. We stayed in the laundry room until dawn, too tired to keep watch, too alert to fall asleep. The storm passed sometime before sunrise, leaving the air heavy and yellowed. Fog clung low to the grass, and the world outside the window looked like it had aged 20 years overnight. The trees had shifted. The dock was missing 2 planks. One of the porch chairs had vanished. I checked the tree. The man beneath it was no longer moving, but his eyes were open. The pupils had filmed over completely. There was no breath, no twitch, no noise. But the expression wasn't slack like a corpse. It was tight, clenched, lips pulled slightly upward on one side like a half-formed snarl frozen in place. I looked closer, from a safe distance behind the tarp we'd strung along the back wall. Something had disturbed the mud around his head, small drag marks, like fingers scratching in the soil. I called Lena out. She joined me with the walkie in hand, testing frequencies one by one. Nothing. We tried the sheriff's channel again. Dead. Tried open bands. Only static. We were cut off again, and someone had been outside the cabin during the night. We both knew it. That afternoon, we went room by room through the cabin, not for supplies, but for anything that might break under pressure. Glass, metal rods, anything that might fall or shatter if someone broke a window. We moved every unstable item into the guest bathroom and locked the door. Then we cleared lines of sight to every entrance and marked off shadows where we might be able to hide if we had to. It was like preparing for a siege without knowing where the enemy was or when they might come. The quiet didn't help. The storm had passed, leaving the air dead still. The forest didn't make a sound, not a bird, not a squirrel, not even the occasional creak of old bark in the wind. Everything felt frozen, and yet not calm. There was something unnatural about the silence, as though the entire landscape was holding its breath, waiting for something to move first. After we'd finished barricading and rearranging, we stood for a while in the kitchen, looking out at the lake. The surface was smooth, unnaturally so. Rain had washed debris down from the higher ridges, and driftwood now floated in tangled clusters near the shoreline. But it wasn't just branches. There were shapes among them, human shapes. At first we thought it might have been clothing, bright shirts or jackets tangled in the debris. But then one of them shifted. A leg kicked upward, slow and aimless, then sank again. Another bobbed to the surface, face down, arms trailing like seaweed. There were 5, maybe more, not clumped together, but scattered, like they'd been dropped from the sky. Some faced the shore, others drifted slowly toward the center of the lake. None made a sound. Lena leaned forward against the window, squinting. "They weren't there yesterday," she whispered. I know. We stepped outside and stood under the edge of the roof, shielding our eyes from the glare. The air smelled off again, thick with algae and copper. That same metallic tinge had returned, faint but sour, like a penny under your tongue. The sun was trying to push through the haze overhead, turning everything a dull amber, and then we heard it. A low droning. I looked up, scanning the horizon. It was coming from the east, somewhere beyond the trees. Lena stepped back, hand shielding her brow. The sound grew louder, a mechanical growl, steady, rising. Then it broke over the ridge. A plane, a float plane. It glided over the treetops and descended fast, angling toward the water with practiced precision. The pontoon skimmed the surface in a spray of mist as the engine throttled down. It coasted across the far side of the lake, maybe 200 yards from shore, and came to rest near the crooked dock of an abandoned cabin. We didn't move, just stared. Two figures jumped out, both in dark jackets. One carried a duffel bag, the other a rifle slung across his shoulder. They scanned the shore quickly, then waved toward the cabin. Another man stepped out from the tree line, shouting something we couldn't make out. A fourth appeared, helping to drag what looked like a fuel container. Then shouting, louder now, angry. One man gestured wildly. The other raised his rifle, not at anyone, just up, warning. Then the shots. 3, then 2 more. Lena gasped and clutched my arm. We couldn't see who fired first. One of the men on the dock ducked behind a pile of crates. Another stumbled backward and fell into the water, kicking up a froth before disappearing beneath the surface. I cupped my hands and shouted, "Hey, we're here. Do you need help?" Nothing. No answer. Lena joined in, screaming across the lake, waving her arms. Still nothing. They didn't look our way. The gunfire stopped, and silence returned. Then something moved near the wreckage of the crates. A figure stood up, jerky, stiff. Not the same as before. This one didn't run. It just lunged toward the nearest man, arms out, head back. And then that man opened fire again. 2 more shots, point blank. The thing fell, then rolled into the water. We backed away. "They're not going to help us," I said. "They're just trying to get out." The plane was idle now, its engine humming quietly. No one else emerged. We returned to the cabin, watching through the blinds. And that's when I noticed something in the water, closer now. One of the bodies was drifting toward the dock, but not like the others. It was moving against the wind. It rolled, turned slightly, and then, somehow it stood. It rose from the water slowly, soaked and broken, legs unsteady. It began wading toward our side of the lake. Not fast, but deliberate. Lena backed away from the window, her voice tight. "There's another." I grabbed the axe from the door. It was still damp from last night, the wood swollen slightly. We stepped outside. The figure was just 15 feet from the shore now, dragging itself through the shallows, arms reaching blindly. It was a woman, young, maybe, long hair plastered to her face. Her clothes were torn, skin bloated from the water. One shoe still hung from her foot, the other missing. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. Then she saw Lena. It wasn't a look of recognition. It was a shift, like her muscles remembered what they were supposed to do. She let out a wet, gargling rasp and lunged. I shoved Lena back. The woman fell forward, landing on her hands and knees, but sprang up again instantly, unnaturally fast for someone with waterlogged limbs. She reached for Lena, nails scraping across her sleeve. I swung the axe. The handle struck her in the shoulder, knocking her sideways. She tumbled to the grass, arms flailing. I raised the axe again, hesitated. She rolled toward me and lunged again. I didn't think. I brought the axe down, hard. It hit her jaw, glanced off the side of her head. She stumbled again, almost falling backward, but didn't stop. Then she growled. Not a word, not a scream. Just that same guttural, grinding growl. I screamed and swung again, this time with both hands. The blade sank into the top of her head with a sickening thud. She collapsed, completely. No more twitching, no more noise, just stillness. Lena stood frozen beside the porch. I turned to her, breathing hard, gripping the axe so tight my hands ached. She didn't speak. We dragged the body to the far end of the fence and left it there, covered with a tarp and weighed down with stones. I couldn't bring myself to bury it. Not yet. Not like this. That evening, Lena was quiet. She sat in the corner of the loft, knees pulled to her chest, staring out the small window toward the lake. I brought her water, but she didn't touch it. Then softly she said, "It's in my ears." I looked at her, confused. "What is?" She tapped the side of her head, just behind her right ear. "That sound. The ringing. It won't stop." I sat beside her, touched her forehead. No fever. Her skin was cool, but pale. Then I saw it. A small trickle of blood, running from her right ear, down her jaw. She looked at me. It started when I saw her, when she came out of the water. And I didn't know what to say. That night was the worst. After everything, the silence, the storm, the strangers at the fence, the twitching corpse under the tree, the girl that rose from the lake like something dredged up from a fever dream. After all that, the thing that broke me wasn't the blood or the body. It was Lena telling me not to sleep beside her. We had always stayed close, even when things got strange, especially then. Her silence had been comforting, her presence grounding. But when the ringing in her ear grew worse, when the pressure made her grip her head and lean against the wall in the loft like something was burrowing behind her eyes, she looked at me and said with a hoarse voice, "You should sleep downstairs, just for tonight." I tried to argue, told her I'd stay awake, watch her. She could sleep, I'd be right there, but she shook her head. "I don't trust what's happening in my head," she said, "but I trust you, so stay near, just not right next to me, in case I wake up different." That word, different, carried more weight than either of us wanted to admit. I sat on the floor by the loft doorway anyway, propped against the frame, watching her until her eyes finally closed. I didn't sleep, just listened. The wind returned sometime after midnight, carrying that soft whistle through the eaves again, the kind that sounded like it was mimicking a cry. At dawn, the air felt colder than usual. I rose slowly, stepped over the pile of towels and bedding she'd gathered around her, and crouched to check her face. She looked peaceful. Her skin was pale, yes, but her lips weren't blue. Her fingers were warm. Her chest rose gently. When I pressed my hand against her neck, I felt it. Slow, steady. A pulse. I let her rest. She needed it. She'd been fighting off whatever this thing was since the moment she heard the ringing. Maybe longer. I grabbed the axe and stepped outside. The light was thin and yellow. Fog had returned to the lake, but it was burning off faster now. The plane across the water was still there, unmoved, its engine silent. No figures moved near it. The fuel containers had shifted in the wind. A few birds circled overhead, but they kept their distance. I walked the perimeter of the cabin, checking the fence again. The hole was still there, where the tree had cracked the chain link. But nothing new had passed through. The body from yesterday remained beneath the tarp, untouched. I checked the nearest neighbor's cabin, just a few hundred feet up the ridge. Still abandoned. The door was ajar. I didn't go inside. Just stood there for a while with the axe in my hand, breathing the sour morning air, trying not to think about the plane, or the girl in the water, or the things that had walked too slowly and breathed too loud. Trying not to think about Lena asleep upstairs who had asked me to stay away. Trying not to think about the blood that had come from her ear, or the way she'd clutched her head like it wasn't hers anymore. I took the long way back to the cabin, giving myself an extra few minutes to pretend everything might return to normal. The power could come on, the sheriff could roll up, Lena would laugh at how paranoid we'd been, and the lake would go back to being just water. The front door creaked when I opened it. "Hey," I called gently, out of habit. "Everything's quiet. We could actually sit down and have breakfast in peace." I didn't get a response. I climbed the stairs, taking them slow. The loft was dim. The curtains were still drawn, just a sliver of light cutting across the floor. She wasn't in the bedroll anymore. I froze halfway up. Something shifted in the shadowed corner, a sharp, broken motion. a limb twisting at the wrong angle, a shudder, like someone waking up from a nightmare and trying to remember how to stand. Then the eyes turned toward me, bleeding. Dark red streaks ran from the inner corners, down her cheeks like tears that had boiled out of her skull. Her mouth was slack. Her lips moved, but nothing human came out. She saw me, but didn't see me, and then she lunged. I barely got the axe up in time, not to swing but to shield. She hit me hard, full weight, shoulder to chest, and her teeth sank into my forearm, just below the elbow. I screamed and shoved her off, stumbling backward up the last 2 steps. She came again, mouth open, growling now. Those same wet, dead sounds from the man under the tree. I shoved her back with the flat of the axe and darted into the bedroom, slamming the door behind me. I pushed the dresser across it, then the chair, then my whole body. She threw herself against the door, once, twice, again, each impact harder than the last, each one sending tremors through the frame and into my back. She growled, clawed, scraped, and then went quiet. I didn't cry at first. I just sat there, stunned, sweating, arm throbbing, fingers tingling. I looked at the bite. It was already darkening. The skin around it swelled, red and glossy. I knew what it meant. I knew what was coming. But none of that hurt as much as the realization that she hadn't waited for me. She hadn't made it. My Lena, the one who'd planned the trip, who'd kept the lights dim and the water hot and the panic quiet, the one who'd made the rules, who'd watched the trees and packed the food and whispered, just for tonight, when she still believed she might wake up okay. I slid down the door and curled there, breathing into my hands, trying to make the tears stop, trying to forget what her eyes looked like, trying to forget the sound of her voice replaced by that awful, echoing growl. She's still out there. I can hear her, pacing, dragging her feet across the wood like she doesn't remember how to lift them, occasionally bumping into walls, growling softly. I don't know how long I've been sitting here, an hour, maybe more. The bleeding slowed, but my skin is cold, my fingers don't move quite right, and I don't think I have much time. I still can't believe this happened to us, that Lena changed. My thoughts are scattered, looping through everything we shared, and everything I didn't do soon enough. I keep thinking about my parents, wondering if they're safe, or if they've already faced what I'm facing now. I'm angry at myself for letting her go outside when that girl came from the lake. I keep seeing all the little things, her jokes, her cooking, how she watched the sky at night and said she felt the trees breathe. I think I was really happy. I didn't realize it until it was already gone. Now I'm trying to hold on to a few clear thoughts, to decide what to do with the time I have left. I could stay here and try to make peace with it. Or maybe there's another way to make sure neither of us ends up hurting anyone else. I'm not sure yet, but I have to be the one who decides. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.